Picture a Viking trader holding up a piece of golden Baltic amber to the light, knowing this fossilized tree resin is worth more than a farm, while Arctic hunters risk their lives among ice floes to harvest walrus tusks that rival elephant ivory in value. So sit back, grab a cup of tea, and get ready to explore how Vikings traded golden Baltic amber and Arctic walrus ivory across continents to acquire wealth and weapons. We'll discover why these luxury materials became medieval Europe's most coveted status symbols, examine how dangerous hunts in Greenland's icy waters and amber gathering on Baltic shores funded Viking expansion, and learn what trade routes, aristocratic fashion, church treasures, and the surprising materials that built Norse power tell us about the sophisticated economy behind the Viking Age. They called it the gold of the North, though it never came from mines. Baltic amber, fossilized pine resin from forests that vanished 40 million years ago, washed up on beaches after storms, ready to be gathered by anyone brave enough to wade into frigid waters. Far to the north, hunters pursued walruses among Greenland's ice floes, risking everything for tusks that European nobles would pay fortunes to own. These two luxury materials, amber and walrus ivory, might seem like footnotes to Viking history. But follow their trade routes and you'll discover they funded expeditions, bought the finest weapons, built trading towns and connected the Norse world to markets from Baghdad to London. The Viking Age wasn't just about raids and conquest, it was about trade. And trade required goods that distant markets desperately wanted. While furs and slaves formed the bulk of Viking commerce, amber and ivory represented the pinnacle of luxury exchange. Light enough to transport across continents, valuable enough to justify dangerous journeys, and coveted enough to open doors in any court, these materials became the credit cards of the medieval world. A Norse merchant arriving in Constantinople with walrus tusks could leave with Byzantine silk. A trader bringing amber to the Rhineland could acquire Frankish swords. These weren't just commodities, they were keys to international commerce. Understanding the amber trade begins on the beaches of the Baltic Sea, particularly along the shores of what's now Denmark, southern Sweden and the Baltic states. Here, unique geological conditions created the world's largest amber deposits. Millions of years ago, vast forests of pine-like trees produced enormous quantities of resin. When these forests were submerged by ancient seas, the resin fossilized into amber, eventually settling in deposits beneath the Baltic Sea floor. Storms and currents gradually erode these deposits, causing amber to wash ashore, a gift from the sea that Vikings learned to harvest systematically. But amber isn't simply picked up like seashells. The best gathering happens after winter storms, when violent waves dislodge amber from the seabed. Vikings would watch weather patterns, knowing that a northeastern gale followed by a shift to the west would likely bring amber to shore. They'd wade into freezing surf, sometimes in darkness, competing with neighbours for the best pieces. The work was dangerous. Winter Baltic waves could knock a person down and drag them out to sea, but the rewards justified the risks. A single fist-sized piece of clear amber could be worth more than a cow. Not all amber was equal. Vikings distinguished numerous grades based on colour, clarity and inclusions. Clear, honey-coloured pieces commanded top prices. Amber with insects or plant material trapped inside was especially prized. These pieces told stories of the ancient forest, frozen in time. Cloudy or fragmented amber had less value but could still be worked into beads or crushed for incense. The rarest finds were pieces weighing several pounds, treasures that might be presented to kings or offered to gods. The Jutland Peninsula, particularly the west coast of Denmark, dominated early amber gathering. Here, generations of families passed down knowledge of the best beaches, optimal weather conditions, and gathering techniques. They used long poles with nets to reach amber in deeper water, and developed specialized containers that allowed water to drain while retaining amber pieces. This wasn't casual beachcombing, but organized industry, with territorial rights jealously guarded and sometimes fought over. Archaeological evidence from Hedeby, the great Viking Age trading center, reveals sophisticated amber workshops. Here, craftsmen transformed raw amber into finished goods, beads, pendants, gaming pieces, and decorative inlays. The workshops show clear organization, with different areas for sorting, cutting, drilling and polishing. Waste materials indicate mass production of standardized items alongside custom pieces for wealthy clients. Some workshops specialized in particular forms. One might produce only beads, while another created elaborate carved pieces. The techniques for working amber required specialized knowledge. Amber is relatively soft and can be carved with simple tools, but it's also brittle and prone to cracking. It melts at low temperatures and can't be worked like stone or metal. Viking craftsmen developed methods using wet grinding to avoid heat buildup and learned to exploit amber's natural fault lines. They discovered that rubbing amber with wool created static electricity, a magical property that enhanced its mystique. Some pieces were heat-treated to darken them or create decorative crackling. While amber came from southern Baltic shores, walrus ivory originated in the far north, the Arctic waters around Greenland, Iceland and northern Norway. Here lived the walrus, a massive marine mammal whose tusks provided ivory, equal in quality to elephant tusks but available within the Viking world. Adult male walruses can weigh over 4,000 pounds, with tusks growing up to 3 feet long. These tusks, actually elongated canine teeth, grow throughout the animal's life, creating dense, fine-grained ivory perfect for carving. Walrus hunting was among the most dangerous occupations in the Viking world. The hunts took place in summer when ice conditions allowed access to walrus colonies, but Arctic summers meant navigating between icebergs in small boats, facing sudden storms, and dealing with aggressive animals that could easily capsize a vessel. Walruses are surprisingly fast in water and will defend their young ferociously. A wounded walrus could destroy a boat with its tusks or drag hunters into freezing water. The Norse developed specialized techniques for walrus hunting. They'd approach colonies hauled out on beaches or ice floes, trying to separate individuals from the group. Spears and harpoons were the primary weapons, with the goal of killing quickly before the animal could escape to water. But even on land, a walrus was dangerous. Their thick hide could turn spears, and their massive bulk made them difficult to kill. Hunters worked in coordinated groups, some driving the animals while others waited to strike. It was brutal, dangerous work that claimed many lives. But walrus provided more than just ivory. The hide, up to 4 inches thick on adult males, was incredibly valuable. When cut in a spiral, a single hide could produce a rope over 60 feet long, ship's rope of unmatched strength. Walrus leather was prized for its durability and water resistance. The meat fed hunting communities, and the blubber provided oil for lamps. Even the bristly whiskers found uses as toothpicks for the wealthy. But it was the tusks that justified the risks and drove expansion into ever more remote hunting grounds. The settlement of Greenland around 985 CE was driven largely by walrus hunting. Iceland had some walrus populations, but they were quickly depleted. Greenland's vast coastline promised unlimited hunting, and Norse settlers established themselves at the edge of the habitable world to exploit this resource. The western settlement, located far up Greenland's west coast, existed primarily to access the Nordosetter, the northern hunting grounds where the largest walrus concentrations lived. Hunters would make summer expeditions lasting months, travelling hundreds of miles north into Disco Bay and beyond. These hunting expeditions required careful planning and substantial resources. Ships had to be provisioned for extended voyages, with backup equipment for repairs in remote locations. Hunting parties might include dozens of men who would establish seasonal camps, process kills, and prepare tusks and hides for transport. The logistics were complex. Tusks had to be removed properly to preserve maximum length. Hides needed careful treatment to prevent decay, and everything had to be transported back to settlements before winter ice made navigation impossible. The human cost of walrus hunting is reflected in archaeological evidence from Greenland. Skeletal remains show the physical toll: compression fractures from heavy lifting, arthritis from cold exposure, and trauma consistent with hunting accidents. Some graves contain hunters buried with their tools, including specialized walrus harpoons. The demographics of Norse Greenland skewed heavily male, suggesting many women lost husbands and sons to the hunt. The pursuit of ivory helped drive Norse expansion but demanded a terrible price. The trade routes that carried amber and ivory from their sources to distant markets were the arteries of the Viking Age economy. Amber from the Baltic moved along several paths. The ancient Amber Road ran south through Central Europe to the Mediterranean, a route that predated Vikings by millennia. But Norse traders developed new routes, carrying amber east along Russian rivers to Byzantine and Islamic markets, and west to Britain and Ireland. Each route had its challenges, middlemen, and profit margins. The eastern route was perhaps most lucrative. Viking traders would sail from Gotland or the Swedish mainland into the Baltic, then up rivers like the Daugava or the Neva to reach interior Russia. From there, they'd transfer to smaller boats or caravans to cross the watershed to rivers flowing south, the Dnieper to the Black Sea, or the Volga to the Caspian. These journeys could take years, with traders wintering in towns like Novgorod or Kiev, building relationships and gathering market intelligence. In these eastern markets, amber commanded premium prices. Islamic sources describe Viking traders arriving with yellow gems that burn with sweet smoke, amber used for jewelry and incense. The Byzantines valued amber for religious purposes, believing it had protective properties. Amber rosaries became symbols of wealth and piety. Viking traders learned to cater to these markets, bringing specific types of amber preferred by different cultures. Clear yellow amber went to Constantinople, while Arabs preferred pieces with inclusions. The western routes were more familiar, but no less important. Amber moved from Denmark to Frisia and the Rhineland, where Frankish nobles paid well for Baltic gold. From there, it might travel to Paris or Rome. The church became a major consumer, using amber for rosary beads, crosses, and decorative elements in religious objects. Monastery workshops developed their own amber working traditions, creating distinctly Christian objects from this pagan-associated material. Walrus ivory followed different routes, shaped by its Arctic origins. From Greenland, tusks moved first to Iceland, then to Norway. Some ivory went directly to European markets, but much passed through Trondheim, where the archbishop controlled lucrative church trade. Norwegian kings took interest in the ivory trade, sometimes demanding tusks as tax payment. From Norway, ivory might go to Denmark and the continent, to England, or east to Sweden and beyond. The logistics of moving these luxury goods required sophisticated organization. Unlike bulk goods such as grain or timber, amber and ivory were high-value, low-volume items that could be carried by individual merchants, but their value made them targets for pirates and bandits. Traders developed strategies, traveling in convoys, hiring guards, using established safe houses, and building relationships with local powers who could provide protection. The profits justified these expenses. A successful trading voyage could make a merchant wealthy for life. Urban centres developed to facilitate this trade. Hedeby in Denmark, Birka in Sweden, Novgorod in Russia. These towns existed because of trade, and luxury goods like amber and ivory formed a crucial part of their economy. Archaeological excavations reveal workshops, warehouses, and marketplaces designed for international commerce. Multiple currencies circulated: Arabic dirhams, Byzantine solidi, Frankish deniers, requiring money changes and standardized weights. Law codes developed to regulate trade and resolve disputes between merchants of different cultures. The seasonal nature of both amber gathering and walrus hunting shaped trade patterns. Amber was best collected in fall and winter after storms. Walrus hunting happened in summer. Processing and crafting occurred year-round, but the primary trading seasons were spring and fall, when weather permitted travel but before winter closed navigation. This seasonality created predictable market cycles, with prices fluctuating based on supply. Smart merchants stockpiled goods to sell when prices peaked. But who bought these luxury goods, and why were they so valuable? Understanding consumption patterns reveals the social dynamics of medieval Europe. At the top were royal and noble courts, where display of wealth signalled power. Amber jewellery and ivory-handled weapons marked their owners as part of the international elite. Gift exchange between rulers often included these materials. A Norse king might send walrus tusks to a Frankish emperor, receiving swords or silver in return. These weren't simple trades, but diplomatic tools that created and maintained political relationships. The church represented another major market. one that grew throughout the Viking Age as Christianity spread north. Ivory was perfect for religious carvings: crosses, reliquaries, book covers and croziers, bishops' staffs. The pure white colour symbolised spiritual purity, while the material's durability ensured sacred objects would last. Amber found different religious uses. Its golden colour evoked divine light, its electrical properties seemed miraculous, and its sweet smell when burned made it perfect for incense. Amber rosaries became so popular that centuries later, paternosters remained a term for prayer beads. Archaeological finds illuminate how these materials were used. Elite graves contain amber necklaces with hundreds of beads, each carefully graded by size and colour. Ivory gaming pieces appear in high-status burials, suggesting board games played with pieces worth small fortunes. Combs made from walrus ivory show elaborate decoration, functional objects elevated to art. These weren't just possessions but statements of identity, marking their owners as participants in international culture. Gender patterns in consumption are revealing. Women's graves more commonly contain amber jewellery, while men's burials feature ivory-handled weapons. But the patterns aren't absolute. Powerful women owned ivory objects, and men wore amber. The materials transcended simple gender categories, instead marking social status and cultural connections. A woman wearing Baltic amber in Ireland proclaimed her family's trading connections. A man carrying an ivory-hilted sword in Iceland displayed his access to Greenland's resources. The economic impact of the amber and ivory trade extended far beyond individual wealth. These luxury goods generated what economists call multiplier effects. Amber gathering employed not just collectors but toolmakers, boat builders and transporters. Workshops required craftsmen, apprentices and suppliers. Trading expeditions needed ships, crews, provisions and financial backing. The wealth generated by luxury trade funded other activities: shipbuilding, weapon production, agricultural improvements. Towns that controlled luxury trade routes prospered, attracting more merchants and crafters in a virtuous cycle. Price structures reveal the relative values. Arabic sources suggest 1 pound of raw amber could buy 3 pounds of silver. Processed amber jewellery commanded higher prices. A well-crafted necklace might equal a small farm's value. Walrus ivory was even more valuable. A pair of good tusks could purchase a cargo ship. Carved ivory objects reached astronomical prices. When the Lewis chessmen, Viking-age gaming pieces carved from walrus ivory, were discovered in the 19th century, their medieval value would have exceeded most nobles' annual income. The environmental impact of harvesting these resources tells a darker story. Walrus populations, once abundant throughout the North Atlantic, faced increasing pressure as hunting intensified. Iceland's walruses were extinct by the 12th century. Greenland's populations declined steadily, forcing hunters into ever more dangerous northern waters. Each generation had to travel farther and risk more for diminishing returns. The unsustainability was evident, but the short-term profits were too attractive to resist. Archaeological evidence from Greenland shows the progression. Early settlement sites contain abundant walrus remains, bones, tusks, fragments, and processing debris. Over time, these remains become scarcer. By the late medieval period, hunters were targeting younger animals and females, signs of a population under severe stress. Isotope analysis of walrus ivory in European collections confirms this pattern. Later pieces come from increasingly remote Arctic locations as accessible populations disappeared. The amber situation was different but related. While amber deposits couldn't be exhausted like wildlife, the best beaches were finite resources. Competition for gathering rights intensified over time. Legal codes from medieval Denmark show increasing regulation, defining who could gather where, establishing closed seasons, and setting penalties for trespassing. What had been a relatively open resource became increasingly controlled by powerful families and institutions. The church claimed some beaches, using amber revenues to fund construction projects. Climate change added another dimension to resource stress. The medieval warm period that facilitated Norse expansion began cooling in the 13th century. Pack ice extended farther south, making walrus hunting more dangerous and shortening the hunting season. Storms became more severe but less predictable, disrupting amber gathering patterns. The same climatic shifts that would eventually doom Norse Greenland first revealed themselves in the luxury trade as resources became harder to obtain and transport. Social stratification intensified as luxury trade concentrated wealth. Successful amber merchants in Hedeby built elaborate houses, copying aristocratic styles. Their children married into noble families, blurring the lines between new money and old blood. But most people involved in luxury trade remained poor, the amber gatherers risking their lives in winter storms, the walrus hunters dying in Arctic waters, the sailors moving goods between markets. The wealth flowed upward to merchants, craftsmen, and ultimately the elite who consumed these luxuries. This inequality generated tensions reflected in law codes and sagas. Regulations attempted to reserve certain luxuries for specific social classes, sumptuary laws that failed as newly wealthy merchants flouted conventions. Sagas describe conflicts over amber beaches and trading rights, sometimes escalating to violence. The distribution of luxury goods became a political issue, with kings attempting to monopolize the most valuable trades. Royal officials at key ports inspected cargoes and claimed the best pieces as tax or tribute. The role of women in the luxury trade deserves special attention. While men dominated long-distance trading and dangerous hunting, women played crucial roles in processing and local trade. Amber working required patience and fine motor skills, tasks often performed by women in household workshops. Archaeological evidence shows women buried with amber working tools, suggesting professional crafters. In trading towns, women ran market stalls, managed inventory, and negotiated with customers. Some wealthy women invested in trading expeditions, providing capital for a share of profits. The religious transformation of Scandinavia profoundly affected luxury consumption. As Norse regions converted to Christianity, demand patterns shifted. Pagan amulets gave way to Christian crosses. Amber that might have adorned a Viking warrior's wife now decorated a bishop's crozier. Walrus ivory, once carved into Thor's hammers, became Virgin Mary figurines. This transition created new markets while disrupting old ones. Christian moral teachings sometimes condemned excessive display of wealth, but church institutions themselves became major luxury consumers. Technological and artistic developments enhanced the value of both materials. Viking Age craftsmen learned techniques from their trading partners, Byzantine methods for creating amber mosaics, Islamic styles of ivory carving, Frankish metalworking that combined precious materials. The Lewis chessmen represent this cultural synthesis. Scandinavian gaming pieces carved in a style showing English and continental influences, made from Arctic walrus ivory, possibly crafted in Norway for export to Scotland. Each piece embedded multiple cultural traditions in maritime ivory. The peak of the amber and walrus ivory trade coincided with the height of Viking Age prosperity in the 10th and 11th centuries. Trading networks stretched from Greenland to Constantinople, from Novgorod to Dublin. A piece of amber gathered on a Danish beach might end up in a Baghdad palace. A walrus tusk from Greenland might become part of an imperial throne in Byzantium. Norse merchants moved confidently through this international economy, their ships carrying northern luxuries to every major market. But this golden age couldn't last. Multiple factors contributed to the decline of Viking Age luxury trade. The Crusades disrupted eastern trade routes, making the journey to Byzantine and Islamic markets more dangerous. The rise of the Hanseatic League introduced new competitors who gradually took over Baltic trade, including amber. African elephant ivory, arriving through Mediterranean ports, provided an alternative to walrus ivory. Changing fashions reduced demand. By the 13th century, coral and jet were competing with amber for the jewellery market. The tragedy of Greenland illustrates the luxury trade's vulnerability. The colony that existed primarily for walrus hunting couldn't survive when that trade declined. As European markets found alternative ivory sources and walrus populations dwindled, Greenland's economic foundation crumbled. The last ships from Greenland arrived in Norway in the early 15th century. When contact resumed centuries later, the Norse settlements were gone. Ghost towns in the ice, monuments to an unsustainable economy. Archaeological evidence from abandoned Greenland farms tells poignant stories. Storehouses contain walrus skulls with tusks removed, inventory that would never reach market. Workshops hold half-finished ivory pieces, abandoned when hope ran out. The western settlement, closest to the best hunting grounds, was abandoned first as the economic logic of its existence disappeared. The eastern settlement held on longer, trying to diversify into other trades, but without the walrus ivory that justified Greenland's isolation, the colony withered. The transformation of Scandinavian economies away from Viking Age patterns also contributed to luxury trade decline. As Norse kingdoms became more like other European states, their economies shifted toward agricultural production and local manufacturing. The age of far-ranging merchant adventurers gave way to more settled patterns. Young men who might have sailed to Constantinople now worked farms or served in royal administrations. The wild edges of the world, where amber washed ashore and walruses hauled out, became peripheral to societies focused on European integration. Yet the legacy of Viking Age luxury trade persisted in multiple ways. The trade routes established for amber and ivory continued to carry other goods. The commercial practices developed, credit systems, quality standards, international law, influenced medieval European trade generally. The urban centres that grew rich on luxury trade remained important commercial hubs. Most importantly, the cultural connections forged by luxury exchange endured. Scandinavia was permanently linked to broader European and even global networks. Modern archaeological techniques continue revealing new aspects of this trade. Isotope analysis can pinpoint the geographic origin of walrus ivory, tracking trade routes with precision impossible even decades ago. Genetic studies of walrus populations show the impact of Norse hunting, with some populations showing reduced genetic diversity from overharvesting. Chemical analysis of amber reveals not just its Baltic origin, but sometimes even specific beaches, allowing reconstruction of gathering territories and trade patterns. Museums worldwide display the fruits of Viking Age luxury trade. The British Museum's Lewis Chessmen draw crowds who marvel at their expressive faces carved in walrus ivory. Copenhagen's National Museum showcases elaborate amber necklaces that proclaimed their wearers' wealth. These objects, beautiful in themselves, gain deeper meaning when understood as nodes in a vast network connecting the Arctic to the Mediterranean, binding diverse cultures through shared appreciation of natural beauty transformed by human skill. The environmental lessons resonate today. The Viking Age luxury trade exemplified what economists call the resource curse, dependence on extractive industries that provide short-term wealth but long-term vulnerability. Greenland's Norse learned too late that basing an economy on hunting a single species to extinction was unsustainable. The competition for amber beaches prefigured modern conflicts over resource extraction rights. These medieval merchants and hunters faced in microcosm the challenges of balancing economic opportunity with environmental sustainability. The social dynamics also echo forward. Luxury goods that mark status in Viking Age continue serving similar functions. Designer handbags and Swiss watches play the role that amber necklaces and ivory game pieces once did, signalling wealth, taste, and cultural capital. The international trade in luxury goods that Vikings helped establish remains central to the global economy. The basic human desires for beauty, status, and connection that drove demand for amber and ivory persist, merely attached to different objects. What can we learn from Viking traders who risked everything for fossilized tree resin and Arctic mammal teeth? First, that human ingenuity in finding and exploiting valuable resources knows few bounds. Vikings looked at storm-tossed beaches and ice-filled waters and saw opportunity where others saw only danger. Second, that trade networks once established create their own momentum, drawing regions together in webs of mutual dependence. Third, that luxury goods play crucial roles beyond mere ornament. They facilitate diplomacy, mark social boundaries, and drive economic development. The amber gatherers wading into Baltic storms and walrus hunters navigating Arctic ice flows were globalists before the word existed. They connected their peripheral homeland to the centres of medieval civilization through materials that nature had placed at the world's edges. Their success created the wealth that funded Viking expansion, built towns, and supported art and culture. Their excess led to resource depletion and economic collapse. In both triumph and tragedy, they demonstrated how luxury trade shapes societies. As you finish your tea and reflect on this journey through Viking Age commerce, consider what materials from today's peripheries might become tomorrow's luxuries. What resources are we exploiting unsustainably in pursuit of profit? What trade networks are we creating that will bind future generations? The Vikings who transformed amber and ivory into wealth couldn't foresee how their actions would echo through centuries. We have the advantage of their example. The question is whether we'll learn from it. The Baltic still yields amber after storms, though mechanical harvesting has replaced the desperate gatherers of old. Walruses survive in reduced numbers in remote Arctic waters, protected now by law rather than distance. The trade routes Vikings blazed remain busy with different cargoes, and in museums and private collections, pieces of amber and ivory preserve not just ancient insects or Arctic memories, but an entire economic system that once spanned half the world. These remnants of Viking Age luxury remind us that what societies value shapes their destiny, for better and worse. In the end, the story of Viking amber and walrus ivory trade is about connection between north and south, periphery and centre, resource and market. It's about transformation of raw materials into finished goods, of local resources into international currency, of dangerous journeys into commercial networks. Most of all, it's about the human capacity to see value where others see only resin and teeth, to risk everything for beauty and status, and to build entire civilizations on foundations as fragile as fossilized tree sap and the tusks of Arctic mammals. The Vikings who mastered this trade left us more than artifacts. They left a template for understanding how luxury, commerce, and culture interweave to create both the glories and tragedies of human society.